All right, guys, we are back in my garage for another video, and today we're going to talk about cooling. In particular, we're going to talk about chiller systems. And for those of you that have been paying attention, this is a very popular upgrade on the market right now. Basically, anybody that has an air-to-water intercooled system can use this to basically supercool their IATs. It's really popular for like a lot of the supercharged V8 guys, and we even see them on S55 cars. But a lot of you guys have asked me, one, why am I not using one? And two, why don't we really see them at all on the B58 platform? It definitely seems like one of the best options if cooling is your priority, but it's just really nowhere to be found. So I want to explain it in this video because I think once you understand how the chiller system works, as well as how our AC system works, it'll make more sense as to why it just doesn't really seem feasible for most people to go this route. So let's go ahead and talk about it, and hopefully you guys find this video useful.
Now, as always, for everybody that's new to the channel, I create these videos to help keep you updated on the latest developments in our community, as well as discuss technical topics so that we have a better understanding of how our engines work. So if you're interested in more videos like that, be sure to subscribe because there will be a lot more coming out in the future.
So as always, before we dive into the details, let's make sure we all have the same baseline knowledge, starting with how an AC system works. And I think the easiest way to explain it is to compare it to a turbocharged engine. We all have turbos on our cars, so it should be pretty straightforward. The air comes into your turbo, and as the turbo compresses that air, the air heats up. Then we put it through an intercooler that cools the air back down before it goes into our engine. That principle very much applies to an AC system as well. Now, instead of working with air, we're going to be working with refrigerant. So this is the gas or liquid that we use inside of our AC system because it is liquid at an extremely low temperature. So that makes it really optimal for a system where you're prioritizing cooling. Instead of a turbo, you have your AC compressor. And the way that your compressor works is when the refrigerant goes in there, just like your turbo, it's going to compress that refrigerant, and that process adds a bunch of heat to the refrigerant. Now we need to start cooling it back down, and so it's going to go into your AC condenser. And this is replacing the intercooler in your turbo engine. So it goes through this condenser, it sheds off some of its heat, and it's basically been compressed into a gas from the AC compressor, and the condenser brings it down to a very high pressure liquid. Now that liquid still needs to be cooled further if we're going to use it for AC, and this is kind of where we step away from the turbocharged example because it needs to be cooled down even further. So now it's a high pressure liquid, and what we're going to do is run it through an expansion valve, and that is going to bring it down to a low pressure liquid. And this is really good because it is, again, at a very low temperature, but refrigerant has a very low boiling point. So basically, if you expose refrigerant to ambient air temperature, it's going to boil and heat up and turn back into a gas. And that's exactly what our evaporator does. So it's basically another heat exchanger, but in this case, instead of cooling the liquid that's flowing through the heat exchanger, it's actually heating it up, because once the refrigerant comes in contact with ambient air, it's going to expand and turn into a low pressure gas. Now that process is pulling heat out of the ambient air. So when the air flows through the evaporator and then comes into the car, it feels very cold because all of the heat that was in the ambient air has been shed off into the refrigerant. And then that refrigerant is cycled back to the compressor, where again, it's compressed and heated back up again. So that cycle basically heats up and cools down the refrigerant over and over so that we can get it to a point where it's cool enough that ambient air blowing over it will give us the cool AC we experience in the car. Now, the challenge here is that our intercooler is also using the coolant from this AC system. So as you guys know, our intercooler is an air-to-water intercooler, and all of the coolant that's flowing through the system is used to cool off the air that's coming out of your turbo. So hot air goes through the intercooler, that hot air basically transfers heat to the coolant, and then the cool air goes into your engine. But we also have a liquid heat exchanger for the AC condenser. So instead of having a big condenser at the front of the car like a more conventional system, we're going to have a small heat exchanger that's actually inside of the engine bay, and you have refrigerant coming in one side and coolant coming in the other side. And that refrigerant is actually hotter than the coolant at this point, so it's shedding heat from the refrigerant to the coolant, and that cools the refrigerant down before it goes to the expansion valve. So this is the biggest challenge here, because if you're starting to put the pieces together, that coolant that you're using to cool off your refrigerant is the same coolant that we're using to cool off our IATs. Now, even though that's somewhat of a conflict of interest, BMW has found a way to make that work. The coolant coming out of your water pump basically tees off. So half of it goes to your AC condenser, half of it goes to your intercooler. They go through and get heated up, and then when they come back together, they go through your heat exchanger to get cooled down. So overall, in that low temp cooling system, we have enough cooling to compensate for both. But what would happen if you threw a third challenge into the mix? That's where this interchiller or killer chiller, chiller system, whatever you want to call it, would come into play. So the way that a chiller works is very much like the way that our condenser works, except in the opposite side of things. So the idea is that you can basically tee off of your AC system and pull some of that refrigerant that has been cooled down, run it through the heat exchanger with coolant coming through the other side, and that refrigerant will pull heat out of your coolant so that when it goes back into your intercooler, it'll be super cooled. And that's where you see some of those pictures where the air to water intercooler has like ice on it and stuff, because the coolant is so cold that any condensation on the outside begins to freeze and create frost. So that's the idea there. You're basically using refrigerant to cool off your coolant instead of ambient air like in our heat exchanger. But the problem, like I said, is we're already pulling heat out of the refrigerant with that same coolant. So now you've basically got a system that's just going to be transferring heat to each other. And as they get hotter and hotter, it's not going to work anymore. So with the standard B58 cooling system, it just isn't something that will work. Now, the main challenge here again is that we're using the same coolant for our intercooler that is being used in this chiller system. So if you want them both to be used side by side, you need to completely separate the systems. And that's really probably the biggest opportunity here. If you see kits that are, designated plug and play, what they're actually doing is coming with their own additional water pump, their own additional heat exchanger, and that will allow you to separate the two systems so that the intercooler can run with one circuit and the AC can run with another circuit. I guess the other opportunity would be to kind of disable your AC and commit all of that cooling just to cooling off the intercooler circuit. But that also would mean that it would only work if your AC was on, and I don't know if that would create another additional problem in its own. So it seems like the biggest opportunity is basically to get your own dedicated heat exchanger, water pump, reservoir, everything dedicated to just your intercooler circuit. And then that way you can have them completely separate and use the AC refrigerant to cool off your intercooler coolant. Whew, that's a lot of words to say at once. Another idea that I've heard is you can convert your AC system to a more conventional one, which I did look into a little bit. It seems like it's plausible because, again, the S55 cars use it. The older F-Series cars use it, like the M235, 335, 435. So if you have like a Gen 1 B58, for example, overall, it feels like there should be a way to integrate a more conventional AC system into how our B58 uses it. But there's going to be a lot of custom work. And even with the current chiller systems on the market, none of them are truly plug and play. You have to fabricate AC lines, fabricate mounting brackets, and it just requires a lot more work than I would probably be interested in putting into the car. So that's why you don't see a lot of interchiller systems out there. Some people have gone that far though to make it work, and they've posted pictures and videos about it. It's just kind of hard to get real solid information on how it's done. A lot of them used fabrication shops and things to help them put the kit together. And there's just a lot of work in the background, I think, that isn't fully understood by people that see it and think it's just something you can simply install and go. So yeah, we'll just kind of have to keep our fingers crossed that maybe something more plug and play and a little more simple will come out. Maybe as technology advances and we get more capabilities, they'll find a way that we can integrate it simply into our setups. But for now, it seems like if you want that kind of performance, an icebox is pretty much going to be your best bet. Although that isn't something that you can use consistently when driving around and stuff. It's really every pull, you'll have to check it, refill it with ice and stuff like that. But if you're looking for like the super cooled coolant temps, that's going to be your best bet in order to get those temps down. But yeah, again, just trying to answer a big question you guys have been asking me. So I think that's it for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope this helps. And if you have any other questions or comments, leave them down below. Yeah, that was funny for like 5 seconds, but it is way too hot for this.